Welcome back to another night of scary stories to fall asleep to. Tonight's tale takes us to a summer camp deep in the woods of New England, where something never left. It had been closed for over 20 years because of a massive fire that gutted most of the buildings. But this year the camp had opened again, quietly, with only a handful of kids signed up. That's what they called it, even though no one used it anymore. It was too dangerous. The roof had caved in during the fire, and the walls were charred black, like the inside of an oven. In the summer of 2006, 18-year-old Emily got her first job as a counselor at a sleepaway camp. She'd heard rumors about the place. There was a small lake nearby and a dirt road leading up to the entrance. Camp itself consisted of a few cabins and a mess hall and a giant stone fireplace beside it. Some kids were locked in their rooms when the fire started and never made it out. It was pitch black outside. There was nothing there. She went back to the counter and grabbed a flashlight. She stepped outside. The kids were nowhere to be seen. No one knew who these kids were or how many there were. The place just burned to the ground. Underneath the door of the bunkhouse, she could see two shadows moving around, just barely visible in the darkness. Whoever was inside was pacing back and forth. All she could see were the shadows moving about. She walked deeper into the forest, calling for the kids, but no one answered. She turned the lights off and went inside. She needed some flashlights for the kids. And while she was digging around, she heard voices in the distance. She couldn't make out what they were saying, but they sounded like they were right outside. If whatever was in there wanted to get out, it could have easily done so, but it didn't. Heavy footsteps coming from inside the house. They were slow and dragging. Then they stopped. The camp was called Camp Hollow Creek. It sat deep in a valley surrounded by trees. The shadows beneath the door, the dragging footsteps, then nothing. The wind picked up, and the thunder rattled the windows of the mess hall where Emily was hiding. The kids were all tucked into bed, and she was watching the bunkhouse when something caught her eye. The beds were empty, but there were wet footprints across the floor. They started by the door and ended in the corner of the room. One of the cabins was off limits. No one ever went there, not the campers or the counselors. It was the old bunkhouse. At least 3 times, Emily woke up to campers sleepwalking toward the building. And Emily noticed that the wood was wet, like rain was seeping underneath it. When the sun rose, she could clearly see 2 sets of footprints in the mud. Someone had gone outside in the middle of the night and walked all the way to the end of the path before turning back. Something was definitely haunting her, and she knew it had something to do with that building. According to legend, something happened in that building that terrible night all those years ago. It was a boy's voice, and it sounded sad. He must have panicked and run into the hallway where he tripped and fell and couldn't get back up. No one even knew he was dead until the firefighters searched the rubble the next day. His name wasn't listed on any roster, so no one knew who his family was. He was reaching out to her, trying to tell her something. He was buried in a cemetery outside of town. No one visited his grave. It was hard to find because it had no headstone, just a small wooden cross with his name carved into it. She could feel it, but she couldn't see it. She tried to wake up, but she couldn't. She was trapped in this nightmare world where the bunkhouse burned to the ground and no one escaped. But it didn't scare her. It intrigued her. What was going on in there? Was it real? She kept it a secret. And every night she would sneak out to the bunkhouse to see if she could find out what was going on. They said if you walked past the building late at night, you could hear voices coming from inside. The campers no longer sleepwalked to the bunkhouse, and Emily's dreams returned to normal. And if you want to hear more tales of horror and the macabre, stay tuned for more content. Until then, remember, some things are better left buried. It was the first time since she started working at the camp that she didn't feel afraid. Perhaps a raccoon, but raccoons don't walk in a line. And Emily could have sworn. She saw 2 very human-looking footprints. When the camp reopened after all these years, everyone pretended like nothing happened here. It was like the fire never took place. But the kids still talked about the bunkhouse. At first, Emily didn't believe them. She thought it was just some campfire story to scare the new kids. But then, she saw something for herself. It was a couple of weeks into her job, and the campers were restless. And she told her about Daniel, the last camper to die, the boy who didn't make it out of the building. They spent all day running around the property, playing kickball, swimming in the lake, exploring the forest. And when the sun went down, they were full of energy. One time Emily was getting stuff from the old mess hall. She turned on the lights and ran to the window. She walked to the edge of the woods and shone her light through the trees. Then she saw it. Emily stood there frozen, staring at the door. It made no sense. She knew the campers weren't in there, so who was? It was then she noticed something else. The windows of the bunkhouse were nailed shut from the inside. She continued to stare at the door. Then the shadows stopped moving. The silence was deafening, and then she heard footsteps, waited holding her breath, listening for whatever was inside to move again, to say something, to do anything, but nothing happened. She stood there for a long time, feeling the cold of the night seep into her bones. As dawn approached, she watched the shadows beneath the door once more. It moved slightly, then stopped. It might have been some animal. She didn't tell anyone about what she saw, though. But every night it was the same thing. One night it rained. There was a loose board near the bottom of the door. It looked like it popped out of its frame. This gave her an idea. She walked closer and looked through the opening. All she could see was a dark, dusty room. Whatever was in here was walking around, and then she heard it. A whisper, right in her ear. "You're late." After that night, everything changed. It seemed like whatever was inside the bunkhouse possessed the kids. The next morning, they were found standing in front of the bunkhouse, drenched and confused. They didn't know how they got there. And then Emily started having dreams. Dreamed of fire and children screaming. And then she heard one name over and over again. Daniel. She woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding in her chest. So she did what anyone would do. She went to the local library and talked to a historian, an old woman who knew everything about the town and its people. She told Emily about the Camp Hollow Creek fire, the fire that killed 10 children. He'd been locked in his room. His parents had come to collect him. But when they arrived, the place was already burning. The worst part was that nobody claimed his body. All that time, Daniel had been trapped in that bunkhouse, unable to escape, unable to find peace. After hearing this, Emily understood. That's why she was having dreams of the fire. That's why she felt his presence sometimes. The next day, she went to the cemetery to find his grave. She stood there for a long time, talking to the boy she never met, apologizing for what happened to him, promising that she wouldn't forget him. And as she stood there, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. After that, the haunting stopped. Maybe Daniel was finally at peace. Maybe he didn't want to scare the new people at the camp anymore. Or maybe he just wanted someone to remember him. Years passed and the camp eventually burned down again. Campfires fade, but some memories still burn. This has been one of many scary stories to fall asleep to. Sleep well if you can. If you enjoyed this scary story, please subscribe and leave a like.